Okay, so Be'ezras Hashem, and continuing along our journey of Rebbe Nachman and the Shpoler Zeide, tonight we're going to read everything we've been talking about into a story that Rabbeinu told, which was specifically about the encounter with the Shpoler Zeide and this secret balancing act that takes place between these two unique tzaddikim. That everything that we've spoken about, which is that the Shpoler Zeide in isolation represents the purity of Chachma, which is a transcendental ideal which operates in the realm of Atzilus without any constriction, which leads to a spiritual perspective of wanting to just break free from the confines of this worldliness, to break free from the constriction and the restriction of Teva, to operate from a perspective of Nisim, to reveal just unbridled goodness without any necessity of effort. That was the territory of the Shpoler Zeide. Rebbe Nachman, on the other hand, was the unique emergence of a tzaddik with the capacity of a bina that has the confidence to descend down away from that original purity of Atzilus, down, down, down into the territories of concealment and concealment within concealment within concealment. And even though that territory appears to be the stark opposite of the territory in which Chachma is going to operate, the task of Bina is to emerge out of Chachma by way of collision to reveal that the light of unity can also be found down here in the territory of disunity, specifically down below in the realms of concealment. That's the avoda of Bina. And so it seems that we have two contradictory elements that are in opposition to one another. The light of the Shpoler Zeide, the Chachma, which exists above in the world of Atzilus, and the light of Rabbeinu, the light of Rebbe Nachman, which exists below down in the worlds of Bria, Yitzir, and Asiyah. But as we've explained, that the ultimate mission of the neshama of Rebbe Nachman was to schlep the light of Chachma down into the territories of Bina, so that Bina can then ascend back up into Chachma. But this time, when Bina ascends back up into Chachma, it's not just back to the status quo as it was before the descent, but armed with the descent and the capacity of ascending upwards, we re-enter into the womb of Chachma and we reveal the true potency, which is the inner interiority of Chachma. And the inner interiority of Chachma is something very different than the original exteriority of Chachma. The exteriority of Chachma is just that Chachma can operate in the clarified realm of Atzilus. The interiority of Chachma, which is emergent as a result of the re-inclusion of the process of Bina and the Yagia inside of it, is the revelation of Pnimius Chachma, Pnimius Da'atik, which is that Chachma not only can manifest above, but it can manifest below as well. The light of Chachma, the light of absolute Bittul, the light of Or Ein Sof that's being Shora in this world, it doesn't need these pristine situations in order to be revealed. It doesn't only operate in the world of Chachma, it operates down in the world of Bina as well. And then when this light of Bina goes back up into Chachma, it reveals the light of Keser. It reveals the light of all lights. It reveals Reisha Lo Yada, that unfathomable, unknowable light of HaKadosh Baruch Hu's unity, which is so rich and so pure and so all-encompassing that both above and below the self and nothingness are both unified as two representations of this unfathomable light. That unity of Keser can only take place by way of the apparent collision between Chachma and Bina. And Bina descends away from Chachma in an apparent severing, which means a descent into constriction. That's the territory of Rabbeinu. But the ascent back up afterwards is going to reveal something very unique. We spoke about how the tzaddikim on the level of Chachma, tzaddik like the Shpoler Zeide, is terrified of the descent down into constriction. They don't want to descend down into the realms of concealment and constriction. Because even though it has to be that Hashem's light is there, the terror is that if we descend down, we're going to forget about the true bittul that we have with HaKadosh Baruch Hu, and we're going to forget about Hashem, and we're going to find ourselves in the yeshus, in the separation associated with Bina. And therefore, the tzaddikim on the level of Chachma, they couldn't tolerate somebody who was apparently going down into the territory of Bina. Why? Because the terror is that Bina is going to be getting stuck in constriction. And even if you want to say that really the purpose of Bina descending down is only to reveal the lights of Keser, the tzaddikim of Chachma and that simple light of purity will still say it doesn't matter what the intentionality of your mission is. There have been so many who have tried to descend down into the realms of concealment in order to clarify the light of HaKadosh Baruch Hu down there, and they all forget about the light of Hashem, and instead of reaching up for Keser, they transform the letters of Keser into Kares, and they find themselves cut off because they forget about the bittul, the self-nullification of Chachma. That the descent down into Bina without the proper care is a descent down into Yeshus, is a descent down into constriction and concealment. And so Chachma is very afraid of Bina going down. But ultimately, the entire purpose of Bina to go down and the unique capacity of a tzaddik who represents the rarefied, purified light of Bina, like Rebbe Nachman, is that not only can I go down without forgetting about Chachma, but I can reveal an even deeper level of Chachma. I can reveal the deepest level imaginable. As we said, that the entire mission of Rebbe Nachman was to descend away from Chachma, to create this machlokas in order to uncover the lights of Reish Loas Yada. The Rebbe Nachman was not afraid of going down the Gesher Tsar Ma'oid Ma'oid of the territory of Bina, of the slippery slope of Bria Yitzir and Asiya. And that's what we're going to see, that a neshama like Rabbi Nachman, a unique neshama that comes to be Megala, to reveal the light of HaKadosh Baruch Hu found within concealment. When the light of HaKadosh Baruch Hu is revealed within concealment, there's an untold amount of illumination that takes shape in reality. It's a yichud that's even higher than the yichud of the light of Chachma. Because the yichud of the light of Chachma is bittul, but the yichud on the level of Bina reveals for all to see that even that which stands in stark opposition to the light of godliness is in truth part and parcel of godliness. And when a tzaddik of the level of Rabbi Nachman, the illumination of Bina, he goes down into the realms of constriction and concealment, all of the things that have gotten stuck in the territories of concealment, all of those thoughts that failed, all of those attempts that fell apart, all of those people who felt that they were stuck, and all of that hopelessness and all of the darkness that each and every one of us feels. When the tzaddik descends down into the territory of Bria, Yitzir, and Asiya, that very often graveyard-like experience, or that garbage dump-like experience, which is littered with manios and constriction, when a tzaddik goes down there into the belly of the snake itself and reveals the nitzotzos to kedusha, and goes down to elevate all of the sparks and the neshamos that are stuck there, there's a profound illumination upon the world. Especially a tzaddik like Rabbi Nachman, who not only wanted to transform the energy of the Yetzer Hara, but understood the potency of the Yetzer Hara, which is that it's the very site in which HaKadosh Baruch Hu wants to be revealed. The Yetzer Hara is going to fight extra hard against a revelation like this, because if it's truly revealed that the Yetzer Hara, the Koyach Medame, is really there just as a servant of HaKadosh Baruch Hu to help us awaken a deeper part of ourselves, then the jig is up, and then HaKadosh Baruch Hu can reveal himself. And so whenever a tzaddik on the level of Bina, especially one of the Yechidei Hadoros, Rabbi Nachman ben Fega, Nachal, Novea, Makor Chachma, literally the Nachal, Novea, that light of Bina that streams forth from within the Makor of Chachma to reveal the potency of Chachma, there's going to be a tremendous hisnagdus against a neshama like this. There's going to be an immense amount of hisnagdus against a neshama that wants to reveal the illumination of HaKadosh Baruch Hu's light down below in the lowest places. There's going to be a profound amount of opposition and conflict that's leveled against a tzaddik who stands to reveal the true potency of what the Yetzer Hara is, because at that point it's going to be the Shchitas HaYetzer. So Rebbe Nachman tells in this story of the spider and the fly, the seventh story in Sipurei Maisios Meshanim Kadmonios, the Yud Gimel Tikunei Dikna, the 13 rectifications of the beard, the 13 midas of Rachamim, the midah of Ve'emes, which we're not going to get into right now. Profound secrets of davening with these kavanos, as the Rebbe Shlita puts into his siddur, that when a person is saying the Yud Gimel Midos of Rachamim, we should go through in our minds the 13 narrative structures of the Sipurei Maisios. And we know that the Tikkun of Ve'emes is the light of Moshe Rabbeinu, it's the most profound light. And this seventh story, which is the most mysterious of the stories on a certain level, is all about Rabbeinu processing and revealing to us what it took for his neshama to come down here. Chidush kamoni lo haya me'olam. Ani ish pele v'nishmasi pele gadol. Rabbeinu understood what he was doing. For a neshama to come down and to go down into the territory of constriction and concealment, and to reveal the light of HaKadosh Baruch Hu there in the most potent of ways, to reveal that Ein Shem Yesh B'Olam Klal, and Afilu B'Hastar Shebetoich Hastar B'Vadai Sham Nimsa HaKadosh Baruch Hu. This light of Rabbeinu is such a potent light that there was such a hisnagdus. And the Yetzer Hara, the Samach Mem, didn't want to let this neshama come down into the world. The Samach Mem, the Sitra Achra, the Tzad of Ra, the Yetzer Hara, the elements of concealment, they didn't want to let HaKadosh Baruch Hu send this neshama down, because a neshama like Rabbi Nachman was going to illuminate those of us who found ourselves stuck in the nether realms of experience, within the Dir B'Tachtainim, within the Choshech HaKaful U'Mechupel. A tzaddik like Rabbi Nachman comes down to extend the hand to those who find themselves stuck in Gehenna, find themselves stuck in the Acharayim of their lives, in the backside of experience. And so the Sitra Achra thrives on individuals getting stuck, because it creates the balancing act of Bechira. So anytime there's a tzaddik tzaddik that's going to come down, chidush kamoni lohaya, the koyach of hischadshus, the koyach of teaching us how to break ourselves free from constriction, there's going to be a tremendous, tremendous amount of hisnagdus. And that hisnagdus, the balancing act that the Sitra Achra has throughout history, is a very, very strong argumentation. It has a strong claim not to let a tzaddik like Rebbe Nachman come down, not to allow this new revelation of Pnimius HaTorah to come down into Metzias. And it seemed that the neshama of Rabbeinu was going to get stuck. But then, and this is all based on Ravitch Shemayr Shlita, there was a tzaddik who took upon himself to act as the menagid. There was one tzaddik, one heilige tzaddik, the Shpoler Zeide, who took upon himself to pretend that he was with the Sitra Achra, to pretend that he was with the Yetzer Hara, to pretend that he was going to be menagid also against this neshama of Rebbe Nachman. And the Shpoler Zeide was a heilige tzaddik. As Rebbe Nachman said, he said, I knew I would have hisnagdus, but from him, I'm very surprised. I'm very surprised that the Yetzer Hara was going to choose someone as big as him. And the secret of the Shpoler Zeide was that the Shpoler Zeide, even though he operated in just a place of Chachma, Chachma always knows what the Tachlis is. Chachma knows that the Tachlis is to reveal the opposite of itself, which is Bina, which seems to operate in opposition to the quality of Chachma, only so that that opposition can reveal the furthering and the deepening of the light of Chachma. The Shpoler Zeide understood the mission, but for the sake of ensuring that Rebbe Nachman could come down into the world, there had to be opposition. The Sitra Achra had to think that there was going to be an active opposition against this soul in this world so that he could allow this neshama to enter into the world and it wouldn't imbalance the scales. And the Shpoler Zeide, we don't know anything, we can't understand anything, but we know what the tzaddikim in our generation tell us. And we know what's Yotze from the Ktsav, and what's Yotze from the Ksavim Ha'amitim. But the Shpoler Zeide was such a tzaddik that he took upon himself to pretend that he was going to be on the side of the Sitra Achra in this world and be menagid against Rebbe Nachman. Why? Ultimately, so that Rebbe Nachman could come down into this world unsupervised by the Sitra Achra. When the Sitra Achra saw, when the other side, when the mitigating side that conceals light in this world saw that the Shpoler Zeide was going to be menagid against Rebbe Nachman, so Avada, the neshama, could come down to this world because the Shpoler Zeide is huge. If the Shpoler Zeide is against him, who's going to believe in this light of Rebbe Nachman? And so the Sitra Achra allows this light of Rebbe Nachman to come down. And once this light of Rebbe Nachman comes down, he goes down, 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 deep into the territories of concealment in order to rectify all things, in order to be matakin everything and reveal the Tikkun Klali, which is the revelation that every descent, everything that feels stuck, everything that falls, is in truth part and parcel of the Ratzon HaElyon once it's seen through the proper lens of Birur, Zichuch, and Tshuva, and it ascends back up to Chachma. This light was now able to come back down into the world. This Tikkun Klali. Why? Because the Shpoler Zeide took upon himself to pretend that he was going to spend all of his energy blotting out this light. That was the Mesiras Nefesh of the Shpoler Zeide, to act as if he's menaged to the light of Rabbeinu. And ultimately, that's the secret, because the Shpoler Zeide understood that I need Rebbe Nachman to come down into the world to reveal the true potency of Chachma itself, which is Pnimius Chachma, Pnimius Ta'atik, which is what we said earlier, that once Rabbeinu was Zeicha to understand the Darga of the Shpoler Zeide, which is Pnimius Chachma, Pnimius Ta'atik, that he was in on it all along and that he knew as well. So then Rabbeinu stopped talking about him, because when it comes to a level like that, Reishad Lo Asyada, anytime we try and pinpoint its definitional point or its localized point, it becomes something else. Not because we are not clarified on it, but because it's everything at once. And in that place, in the light of Pnimius Chachma, Pnimius Atik, there's nothing to talk about. And so there were other tzaddikim like this. Rav Naftali Rapshitzer Tzchus Yagan Aleinu also pretended to be on the side of the Sitra Achra in one element or another, not in ways that we can ever conceive of or fathom. But he said until his dying day, the Sitra Achra assumed that he was his biggest representative in the world. There were many tzaddikim who acted in this way. But the Shpoler Zeide took upon himself to be menaged against this neshama so the neshama can come down. And what this is going to be revealed in is going to be the Maisa Me Akabish V'Zvuv, the story of the spider and the fly. Now forgive me, because I've been in this story for over a year now, and I've been in the sugya for over a year now. And I'm so up and down in the sugya, and I'm so twisted around in the sugya that I've been caught up in kind of the spider web of it all. But ultimately, what I'm going to try and convey is my humble understanding of it, my humble understanding of the story. We're going to read the story, we're going to read the words of Rabbeinu, and I'm going to interject the narrative structures that, based on the previous shirim that we've been given, will give us a little bit of an insight into some of the ramazim of this ancient, hidden thing, this tikkun of the emes from within the Sipurei Maisos Meshanim Kadmonios. And we're going to see how hidden in this is the very nukuda that we've been talking about, the apparent machlokas between Chachma and Bina. And ultimately, the real purpose of Bina, which is to descend down into constriction, to reveal the true potency of Chachma, to come out the other side with a profound light of Keser, to reveal how all that seems to be down here, all that seems to get stuck, all of the difficulty and the struggle and the ups and the downs and the changes and the shifts that are associated with Bina, all of them are re-included in the Yichud. And this brings to the Sleik Na'a, this brings to that future laughter that's going to be revealed in the unification of Mashiach ben David and Mashiach ben Yosef, and the secret of Lav Yasan and the Shor Habar, which is going to be the Yichud Ha'amiti between the Shpoler Zeide and Rebbe Nachman, the descent of Bina away from Chachma, and then the ascent of Bina back into Chachma to reveal Pnimius Chachma, Pnimius Ta'atik, which is the secret of Malchus Agnuza Baradla. And that's what we're going to enter into when we look at this Maisa. Be'ezras Hashem. Be'ezras Hashem. Maisa Zayin. Shem Yuchad Kutchabrichu V'Shlente B'Dechidu V'Rachim U'Liyachid Shem Yudke B'Vavke B'Yechidu Shilem B'Shem Kol Yisrael Hashem Safasai Tiftach U'Fi Yogid Tilasecha. Anava Amar. Anava Amar. Rabbeinu answered and he said, who was he answering? It doesn't matter. He was answering the questions that we have. Asaper Lechem Kol HaNasiya Shali Shahayali. Rabbeinu opens up the Maisa and he says, I'm going to tell you all about the journey that I've had. And the Meforshim explained that this is the journey of Rabbeinu's neshama coming down into this world. It's also the journey that Rabbeinu had just gone on, which was the sparking of the future journey to Eretz Yisrael, which is the descent of Bina away from Chachma into the territories of constriction, and then the eventual ascent upwards. That's the Nesiya. All of the masa'os, all of the nesiim, all of the movements, all of the shifts and the changes, they're all expressed within this nesiya, the nesiya of Bina from within Chachma, of confusion from within clarity, and then the eventual ascension of that confusion back into clarity. Asaper lechem kol hanasiya shali shahayali. Rabbeinu says, as representative of the Nakuda of Bina, I am going to tell you the entire journey. And this journey is ultimately the very thing we've been talking about all along, the journey of Bina from within Chachma down to an apparent state of opposition against Chachma, and then back again to the innermost territory of Chachma, which reveals the innermost light of it all. Maisa b'melech echad. Once upon a time there was a king, Shahaya alav kama milchamos kvedos, v'kavash osam, v'lakach shvuyim harbe. Once upon a time there was a king who had gone through many, many battles, many difficult battles, and he had conquered and overcome all of those battles. And not only that, but he retrieved for himself prisoners of war and extras from the enemies, and he re-included it, the Shvuyim Harbe. So like we said, Chachma and Bina are always arguing about Malchus. The real question is Malchus. Malchus is the thing that's going to have to be clarified in this world. That's the Melech Echad, Malchus. Hashem reveals Malchus in the world, and Malchus is going to go through all sorts of difficulties, all sorts of processes. Not the innermost Nakuda of Malchus. The innermost Nakuda of Malchus is one fell swoop away from the unity of Chachma, like we said, that Chachma is engaged with the Pnimius of Malchus. And from that place, Malchuscha Malchus Kalolimim. It's not such a Nesiya. It's not such a big milchama. In fact, it's a derech of shalom. There's no problem there. With one fell swoop of bittul, everything is mitaken. The battles of Malchus are chitzonius Malchus, like we said, which is associated with Bina. When Malchus descends down from the territory of Atzilus and it breaks through the barrier separating Atzilus and Bria, and it descends down into the territories of Bria, Yitzir, and Asiya. When Malchus goes down in the nighttime, down into the territories of constriction. When Esther Malka goes into the Beis Hatzlamim prior to entering into Achashverosh's house and says, Keli, lama azavtani, that place where all of the moichin are gone, and all that remains is the Nakuda Pnimius. That's the chitzonius of Malchus. So this Malchus that has gone through all of these milchamos is the representation of the tikkun of chitzonius HaMalchus, the externality of this world, the process of it all, the agia of it all, and ultimately its capacity to have come through all of those battles, which means that Bina doesn't get stuck. In fact, Bina is able to clarify all things and bring things back to the place that they need to go. V'lakach shvuyim harbe. What's the tachlis of this milchama? What's the tachlis of all of the milchamos? That Malchus descends down in order to retrieve all of the sparks that are stuck underneath, all of those neshamos that haven't had a tikkun yet, all of those points and knots of consciousness that had not yet been exposed to the illumination of godliness because they felt that we're too far gone or there's no light of godliness strong enough to reveal itself down here. Comes along Rabbeinu, comes along the light of the chitzonius of Malchus, which is mezuchach al yedei bina, and it comes and it elevates all things. So this is the Maisa b'Melech Echad, the Malchus that's being mezuchach according to Bina, which is the Chitzonius Malchus, which now it goes down into all of these difficult battles and all of these difficult processes, and it wins. It ascends upwards afterwards, and not only that, but it takes all of these extras. Something I love very much are the Rosh Tevos. We're not going to go through all of them, but V'lakach Shvuyim Harbe is Rosh Tevos Shav, equanimity. That's one of the things that is gained most importantly when a person descends down from that realm of pure unity into the territory of concealment and constriction, is that we force ourselves to cultivate a perspective of equanimity, shav. So lakach shvuyim harbe, that it's specifically by way of the descent away from clarity into a territory of concealment that we uncover the secret of equanimity. Zok the Heilige Rebbe, in parentheses, betoch devarav shehitchil esaper zois hamaisa, ana va'amar bezu halashon. In the middle of Rebbe Nachman giving over the story, he paused from the narrative, and he said as follows, Tomru sha'asaper lachem hakol, v'tuchlu lahaven. Remind me that I should tell you everything, that I should tell you the whole story, and then you'll be able to understand. So over here we could be medayik that Rabbeinu is saying only if you hear the entire story you'll be able to dafka understand lahavin, the darga of bina, because the whole tachlis of this maisa is to reveal the tachlis of bina. So what's the danger of only telling half the story of bina descending down from chachma and not telling the whole story? The danger is that, like we said, the descent down into the territories of constriction, the descent down into the territories of this worldliness, of Bri, Yitzir, and Asiya, can be a very dangerous territory. It's where we encounter yeshus, it's where we encounter ego, it's where we get caught up with the external narratives of our individualized lives, and we forget about the inner narrative of Nishmas Yisrael. And the tzaddikim of Chachma are very worried there, especially because if a person arrests their development and they descend down into the world of Bina and they say, wow, I love the Aish that takes place by me encountering all of the constriction and the awakening of the selfhood, but they forget about returning back to Chachma, so then it becomes a kares. So Rebbe Nachman is hinting here that if you want to truly understand the secret of Bina, then you have to tell the whole Maisa, which is not just that Bina descends down from Chachma. That's only one stage of it, but if we stop at that stage, then we get stuck in constriction. The second stage, which is the end of the Maisa, is the eventual ascent of Bina back out of constriction, back into Chachma, which is ultimately to reveal the light of all things, which is the light of the Keser. V'haya hamelech oisa suda gedola shakorim bal b'chol shana ba'osa hayom shakava shamachama. And this king, this Malchus, this Chitzonius of Malchus, each and every year in the day of commemorating the process that it had gone through, the descent down into the realms of constriction and the battles and the wars, and the eventual ascent outwards. So every year in celebration of this Malchus would make a celebration. And this inyan of the celebration of Malchus, in my humble opinion, is the element of Rosh Hashanah. The element of Rosh Hashanah. Rosh Hashanah is the beginning of the year. HaKadosh Baruch Hu builds the world out of din. The Suda Gedola, which is Rosh Tevos Sag, which is the Shem Havaya that's associated with Bina. The Suda Gedola, that this Melech, Shakavash, Kol HaMelchamos does, is the Kibbutz HaGadol of Rosh Hashanah. As Rebbe Nachman says, Man Iker Zach is Rosh Hashanah. Why is his Iker Zach Rosh Hashanah? One of the elements, again, these are mysteries upon mysteries, but Rabbeinu said it. And one possible element is that Man Iker Zach is Rosh Hashanah because Rosh Hashanah is the Chitzonius of Malchus. Rosh Hashanah is the constriction, the din of Malchus, where there's a judgment upon the world, and it's going to be a question of how the externality of the world goes, which is why, for most part, that the place where the kibbutz is Uman, which is an element of Bina, and now we have a fuller revelation of the kibbutz in Yerushalayim as well, which is the secret of Bina within Chachma, which leads to a closer element of Keser. But the entire inyan of Rosh Hashanah is tied around this constriction, this element of Chitzonius Malchus, that Uman is the farthest that the perspective can go, where the light of God is still found in spite of its constriction. So this Suda Gadola, this Kibbutz HaGadol, this Hamtaka of all the dinim, every Rosh Hashanah, what happens is that Malchus in its Chitzonius stands in order to ascend all the way back up to the source of all things in the Zman of Tekiah Shofar, in the Zman of the Tfilos, which is back to its Shoresh HaElyon, which is Reisha Deloas Yada. It's the revelation that the Chitzonius of Malchus and all of the doubts and all of the Sveikos and all of the constriction of this world is in truth rooted in the crowning jewel of HaKadosh Baruch Hu's Malchuscha Loilamim, in the light of Malchus to Ein Sof. That's the Kibbutz HaGadol of Rosh Hashanah. That's the hamtaka of all of the tzimtzum, as Rebbe Nachman says, that coming close to the tzaddik on Rosh Hashanah is the shorish of the din, where everything gets nimtakt in its shorish, where all constriction goes back to the source of the initial constriction, and all constriction is shown to be a representation of a Kadosh Baruch Hu's unfathomable and infinite light. So this Suda Gedola that this Melech would make every year after going through all of these Milchamos, after going through all of this constriction, is the secret of Malchus in the externality of itself, being Mevurar al Yedei Bina, which is Hamtakas Adinim B'Sharasham, and then coming to another year and finally ascending up into that place above all Shinoi, back into the Shoresh of the Malchus in order to bring down new light for the year, and that's the Suda Hagadola. So the full culmination of this tzaddik, who is the chitzoni, who's willing to descend down into the chitzonius of Malchus, the constriction of this world, because it's specifically through Bina, through the refinement of Mevin Davar Mitoch Davar, the descent down into Medama and imagination that's going to be mamtik, this worldliness. So that's going to be the Suda Hagadola, the Kibbutz Hagadol of Rosh Hashanah. And the words here, korin ball, they call it a ball, but that's Beis Aleph Yud Lamed, which is Lev, which is the element of Bina as well. And what would happen at this ball? V'hayu sham al habal kol hasari melucha v'chol hasarim kederach hamalachim. So at this ball, it's not only a celebration of the recreation of the world and the hamtaka of all of the dinim for only the king and his people, but rather it's for all of the ministers, all of the nations of the world. Everybody is judged on this day, on that day where all of the dinim are being refined, and that kibbutz hagadol. And so all of the Sari Malucha from all of the other kingdoms in the nation, they gathered together, as kings do when they have celebrations. All of the kings gathered together at this ball. But what were they doing at this ball? What were they doing on this element of Rosh Hashanah, representing the hamtaka of all of the dinim, and specifically the chitzonius of Malchus, by way of utilizing the kochos of Bina, which is the severity of the mind and the need to descend down into constriction? What was happening at this ball? What was happening at this kibbutz? Hayu oisim sam inyane schoik shekarim kamadis hatzagos. V'hayu mesachakim v'soichakim mikol ha'umus. Mei hayishma'el mikol ha'umus. V'hayu oisim uma'akmim b'derech schoik k'derech hanimus v'hanhaga shel kol umma. U'min hastam mei Yisrael gam ken hayu oisim schoik. So what was happening at this ball? What was happening in this ball is as follows. They were making a laughing stock out of all things. That there were comedians there were actors, there were Sari HaMelucha, there were those who worked for the king, who were there making shtick and making comedy out of all of the nations and their ways, all of the ways in which each nation would present themselves, all of the postures and the levushim and the perspectives and the seriousness. They would make a schoik out of it. They would imitate it. They would make fun of it. They were making fun of all of the nations, making a schoik by way of imitation. A mimetic mockery, by showing that what's the mockery of imitation? What's the laughter that emerges from imitation? That each person thinks they're so unique in the way that they present themselves. Each and every individual feels so hyper significant and real and identifiable based on the things that they think represent them. Their wins, those things that make them this thing and not some other thing. Each person with their own traits, each person with their own seriousness, each person with their own cares. And we in all of the nations live in accordance to those things that make us feel who we are. And the reason they identify who we are is because they differentiate us. They make us feel different from other people. They make us feel unique. And it's this infantile desire to feel fundamentally unique rather than to see oneself as being nichlal within the whole. And therefore, the comedy that was performed, where the servants of the king would imitate all of the nations, highlighting the fact that all of the things that you think are so unique are not so unique. They're imitatable. Each and every person can do it. A monkey could do it. Hamelech of kuf, kof, beschok. That's the laughter and the ape-like comedy of just imitation, of mockery and mimicry, and showing that in truth, all of the hyper-significance of each and every thing in its lodgedness is in truth just a laughing stock, and it's built upon nothing, and there's no serious in the Welt, and everything is a big schoik. That's what's miskala on Rosh Hashanah. On Rosh Hashanah, all of the seriousness, all of the tzimtzumim, all of the constrictions are brought closer to the shorish of all of the tzimtzum, and they're undone, they're nimtak in their shorish. And that's what's taking place here, that the officers of the king are mocking the nations of the world. And why Dafke Yishmael? Because Dafke Yishmael, but also because the light of Rosh Hashanah is about Yitzchak. It's the light of the Schoik de Kedusha. It's that Rebbe Nachman wanted to be called Yitzchak on his descent into Eretz Yisrael. That Bina is associated with Yitzchak. It's the light of severity that's mamtik all of the dinim by way of laughter, the Schoik de Yitzchak. And so Yishmael is the schoik that tries to nullify Yitzchak, and Yishmael is the last klipa that has to be undone and redeemed prior to the final redemption. And so there's a hint here to the fact that they were making fun of all of the nations, even Yishmael. And the officers of the king were mimicking and imitating and making schoik and devaluing by way of mimicry and mockery, and this profound depth of not a nihilistic comedic act, but a dislodging from seriousness, a causing others to take themselves less seriously. That's what the comedic imitation was there as. And Rebbe Nachman says something incredible, that at this story, they weren't only doing it for all the nations, and theoretically, min hastam, Klal Yisrael were also being made fun of. And so we have this Suda Gedola, when Malchus ascends back to its true place, after all of its journey downwards, into the constriction, into the concealment, into all of the difficulties. And Malchus finally ascends up through all of those constrictions, after all of the milchamos, and after all of the journeys, back, up to the point, not only Chachma, but into the inside of Chachma, back into the Pnimius of Chachma, back into Pnimius of Atek, into Reisha Luas Yada. That's the light of Rosh Hashanah. That's the Kibbutz HaGadol. And what's happening at the Kibbutz HaGadol? The light, the revelation that Bina is bringing back into the picture is the recognition of schoik, to take it less seriously, of a mockery that doesn't try and nihilistically deny the significance of anything, but it simply gestures towards the need to take oneself less seriously, because the things that we feel so serious about can be imitated by anybody else. And that ape-like quality and that dislodgement that takes place when I realize that, oh my gosh, there's a replaceability to myself. There's a Heichale HaTemuros, and all of the hyper-significance that I thought makes me who I am is not truly what makes me who I am. And we begin to think about what truly makes us who we are. And it's certainly not the levushim that we garb ourselves in. Because Rosh Hashanah is the revelation that all of it is interchangeable ultimately, and there's no greater laughingstock than this to reveal the interchangeability of all things and the randomness. And the randomness that seems to be revealed on Rosh Hashanah, where everybody is dislodged. And then Rebbe Nachman had something profound, that theoretically it was also about Klal Yisrael. That min hastam, it was also about Klal Yisrael. So it's a deep inyan, because in truth, even though Klal Yisrael is different than all of the nations of the world, and even though there's a profound hyper-significance to everything that we do, unlike the nations of the world that don't have that same razor-sharp hyper-essentiality, that there's a laughter that can be applied to Klal Yisrael also, but this laughter is not like the laughter of everybody else. It's min hastam. Stam over here represents stimu de stimen, the concealed of all concealment, the light of the sharish of Nishmas Yisrael, the lights of Reishad Loas Yada, where in truth, at the bottom and the end of the day, we don't know what makes us different, other than the fact that HaKadosh Baruch Hu Stam chose us. It's the randomness of the Mikra of Megillah, which reveals the ascendancy of Nishmas Yisrael over and above everything else. But it's min hastam. And on Rosh Hashanah, there's that same Gilui, Tin Nishmas Yisrael itself, that we're also replaceable, but not because we could be replaced, but because only Hashem is the thing that's giving us our shape. Only Hashem is giving us our koach. And the moment we think it's about us, or that it's as a result of what we're doing, we're missing the point, because the truth of the matter is that min hastam, it's only from the stimu de stimen that HaKadosh Baruch Hu chooses Nishmas Yisrael. As Rav Tzadok says, that the true havchana, the true distinction between Nishmas Yisrael and Esav, is ultimately mushrash in the Reishad Loas Yada. And it's only in that place, min hastam, on Rosh Hashanah, where we also let go of all of our seriousness and we awaken ourselves to that schoik de Yitzchak, of being dislodged by way of the schoik, of the laughter and the taking ourselves less seriously. It's not a nihilistic letting go of significance, but it's a coming to terms with the mimicry that is available to everything that we do, and the posturing that we're engaged in, and the need to perpetually let go of the belief that I'm doing everything fundamentally lishma, and enter into the higher level of lo lishma, and then go into a new level of lishma, the willingness to live ki'ilu v'chule v'chule. That's taking place on Rosh Hashanah as well.